The world is getting to know the first American Pope as he takes the helm of the Catholic Church. And this morning, Leo XIV celebrated his first Mass since being chosen as Pontiff. And he became the first to start his first homily in English. The new Pope was born in Chicago as Robert Francis Prevost. He has two older brothers who used to tease him about one day becoming Pope. I want to bring in CNN's Whitney Wild from Chicago because she just spoke to one of his brothers. Tell us about that conversation, Whitney.
Pamela, we talked a lot about what his childhood was like, what were the sights and sounds, and what John Prevost described to us was it was a really typical suburban American upbringing. It was sports with the neighborhood kids. It was pickup games of football and baseball. He also talked quite a bit about his mother. Their mother had this beautiful singing voice. She was a member of the church choir, and their experience as a family, as I had said before, was in so many ways very typical, but there's one way it was not typical. And it was very clear from a very early age that now Pope Leo would go on to do something great within the church. And there was this moment when their family dropped him off when he left to go begin that journey. We talked a little bit about that moment with him. Here's what John Prevost said about the moment that his brother left their family at just 14 years old to begin his journey in the Catholic Church.
It's bittersweet in the sense that when we dropped him off for freshman year of high school, the ride home was very sad in the sense that, like you just said, he's leaving, he's gone. We'll see him once in a while. Now it's even worse in the sense that will we ever get to see him unless we go over to Rome? You know what I mean? Like last year as Cardinal, the Pope said, go take 4 weeks. So here he was. I don't think we're going to have that anymore.
How does that feel as a brother?
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
He now belongs to the rest of the world, and that's one thing that John Prevost is coping with at this moment. It was really extraordinary to hear him talk a lot about that, Pamela, because I think what people maybe don't remember is that these are normal people with normal people around them who love them, and now he is... again, he belongs to the rest of the world. But today, John Prevost, in a couple hours, is getting in the car. He is going to go to Rome and see his brother now as Pope. So what an extraordinary moment awaits him in Rome.
Wow.
Pamela?
Can you imagine just what that is like for a family when a sibling becomes Pope? Whitney Wild, excellent interview with the brother. Thank you so much.
It's the Pope. That's how the Chicago Sun-Times summed up Leo XIV, who was born and raised in the Windy City. This morning featured another historic moment. The first American Pope began his first homily in English.
Begin with a word in English, and the rest is in Italian. But I want to repeat the words from the responsorial psalm. I will sing a new song to the Lord because he has done marvels. And indeed, not just with me, but with all of us.
My panel is back, and we're joined by Stephen White, the Executive Director of the Catholic Project at Catholic University. Welcome back. It was just a few days ago you were sitting right at this seat, and we were saying, oh, there's probably not going to be an American Pope. And here we are.
We were hoping for a Jersey Pope, and it turned out to be a Pope from Chicago.
Yeah, but you're happy. You're happy about that.
I won that one, yeah.
So, I mean, what are your sort of feelings about this as somebody who literally studies the American Catholic population as strictly as you do?
Yeah, it was interesting to see right when he came out on the loggia, when he was first announced to the world as Leo XIV. There were a couple symbols he was clearly sending. One was he talked a lot about the themes that were big in Pope Francis's pontificate, but he was also dressed in a way that Pope Francis wasn't when he came out. He was dressed in a way that sort of signaled a continuity with Benedict XVI and John Paul II and previous popes. So I think he was signaling a kind of synthesis of the two. We're going to keep going forward with being close to the poor and looking to the peripheries like Francis did. But the church didn't start when Pope Francis was elected. And then we're going to build on what's solid and secure. I think there's an interesting thing in the church in the United States. We see this uptick among interest in Catholicism among young people. There's a slight rise, it's small, but there's a notable rise among young people going to Mass. You see an interest among a generation that frankly, people who are 40 years old and younger have grown up in a world where the big institutions of society haven't really been working all that well. Our politics are increasingly polarized. The church has gone through a horrible abuse crisis here in the United States. I think they're looking for something solid, something that can allow them to put roots down deeper. And the church can provide that by saying, look, we're here through all of that, and gives us a firmer foundation, not absolute certitude, but something solid to build on. And we see that here in the United States. We see that among younger Catholic priests who are theologically very conservative, but politically moderate and ethnically diverse, more so than older priests.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the P word, politics, because we have seen the tweets from an account posting in Prevost's name. Prevost is Pope Leo's previous name, birth name. And in these posts, he, or the post at least, talks about J.D. Vance's Ordo Amoris and what the gospel asks of all of us on immigration. Another said, J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others.
Yeah, I mean, again, as you said, it's an account that looks like it's being posted by the new pope, but across the board, it's taking a very different position than what the Trump administration is taking. Very similar to Pope Francis, in saying that that countries like the U.S. should be welcoming to refugees, should be welcoming to immigrants and migrants. Because we heard Pope Francis basically say he was not necessarily on board with this administration's deportation or immigration policy. And so it'd be interesting to see how much Pope Leo now decides to carry that on and to be a slight opposition force to the administration, if at all, in terms of how he thinks countries should treat the poor and immigrants.
And it's seen through a different lens because he is American. But as you mentioned, Pope Francis was very, very clear that he did not like the Trump administration's immigration policies. And it was interesting to see J.D. Vance, who is now a devout Catholic, tweet about Pope Leo. And he said, I'm sure millions of American Catholics and other Christians will pray for his successful work leading the church. He didn't say he would. He's a Catholic.
I'll give him a little leeway here and assume that he is as a Catholic. I mean, also as a Catholic, regardless of our personal views of the Pope's very specific personal positions, we tend to pray for the Pope and hope for his success, just as I think Americans probably do for their president in general. I think that, your point about younger people, the uptick there, Washington has always been a fascinating dynamic in Catholicism. The kind of open and very public discussion about the faith and how the faith should go or trend with the newer converts in particular, the younger members in particular, people like J.D. Vance, is a shift. That group, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is my sense, is far more conservative, I think, in terms of how we in the faith would think about it. And would disagree, as you've seen J.D. Vance do in the past, with some of the positions of a more Jesuit-aligned kind of direction of things. The one thing I would say is immigration in general, there's a pretty unified view on that within the church that is diametrically opposed to where the Trump administration is. I think the thing that I'm fascinated by, beyond the discourse about White Sox or Cubs, which is by far the most important thing that we understood yesterday, is
He's White Sox
what
for
is
people who
emphasized by Pope Leo, not necessarily kind of the core beliefs. The core beliefs are going to be the same. What he decides to emphasize, talk about, and focus on.
And it does seem to me like we're talking about the immigration positions now. Like he does not seem to be where a lot of Democrats, for example, would want him to be on gay marriage or
He's Catholic,
right?
Not a Democrat.
I think what it really comes down to is it really says something about the political moment that we're in America and beyond. But in America, where it's right away, is the Pope, is he more with Trump or not with Trump, right? He is the Pope.
But that's also coming from MAGA world.
For sure.
Yeah, to go back a word in defense of the vice president, in that very tweet, he said, may God bless him.
He did.
That's a prayer. That's him asking God to bless him. That's
All right,
a prayer.
I'm glad you said that.
I think, the Pope has spoken in the past. There's sort of limited public statements. And his position on immigration, as I've understood him in the past, is this. It's very similar to what the USCCB has said. It said, not everybody who arrives here needs to be let in or allowed to stay. Okay, but that having been said, the one absolute thing that must happen is that these people who come here, most of them needy and looking for a better life, must be treated with dignity and with respect. And I think that's the point of emphasis you'll see over and over. It's not going to be that Rome wants to dictate this or that particular policy on immigration, but the emphasis and insistence that these are human beings who must be treated with dignity and respect, because that's what they deserve, and it also says a lot about us, whether we treat them that way or not.
And for people to call that position woke, which is like it's a new way of thinking about things, he's going, I'm no expert on Catholicism or the Pope, but that's not reflecting like a revelation of the Catholic Church in the last couple of years. That's going back millennia.